Now, after all these special racing machines, see what a Morris Minor can do. We wanted to find out if the 100-pound car could do 100 miles per gallon and 100 miles per hour. So we took a standard side valve cylinder block and fitted it with a supercharger, but using mostly standard parts. The frame, for instance, was of standard design with semi-elliptic springs front and rear, and with provision for the tank at the back, a standard feature. The body, of course, was special, based on a carefully worked out streamlined design with a radiator outside the nose of the shell to decrease wind resistance. The original trials took place on the road soon after dawn one morning. The carefully streamlined car glistened in the early sunshine, and there was great excitement and anticipation on the part of the engineers who had developed the car and the mechanics responsible for its production. After a few last-minute adjustments, it was all ready for its first high-speed effort. On the test bed, the engine had shown itself capable, with the supercharger in action, of giving no less than 50 brake horsepower, a momentous achievement for a unit taxed at only 8 horsepower. The body, to reduce wind resistance, had been made as narrow as possible and had actually been built round the form of the chosen driver, Mr. Van der Beek, to enable the greatest overall efficiency to be obtained, and there was not very much room for him to get into the driving seat. But when the bonnet had been carefully strapped down, after a last-minute inspection, he took his seat, and very soon the car was under way for the first time under its own power. The road surface was of normal quality. Then, after examination at the works, it was taken down to Brooklands track, where, after the timekeepers had decided that the weather, although wet and windy, was not totally impossible, it was finally prepared for the speed attempt, filled up with petrol, and in order to save the necessity for doing initial runs at low speed to get the engine warm, the sump was filled with hot oil. Morrisol, of course, was used. The cowl was also put over the radiator to enable the heat to be retained. Then, under her own power, she was run out from the sheds into the paddock, as tractable at low speeds as a touring car. And after the timekeepers had given the OK, she was released out of the paddock onto the track and then into the final tuning bay where clean sparking plugs were fitted. And in accordance with the best record-breaking practice, the final look over for security was given to see that everything possible to ensure the driver's safety had been done. But beyond changing sparking plugs, there was practically no work at all. Fuel, oil, and water were once again checked over. The car was turned round and pushed off, and it was starting its official full-throttle trial in a very few minutes. No trouble was experienced, and back in the shed all was found to be in order and the driver perfectly comfortable. The timekeeper telephoned to say that the 100-mile-an-hour mark had been exceeded by a big margin. To do this astonishing speed in such a small, economically designed car is a very fine achievement for the driver, Mr. Van der Beek, who is the subject of well-deserved congratulations, and also for the designers and the engineers who had had a hand in the making of this remarkable car. Back at the works, after this fine speed performance, Sir William Morris decided to find out what was the minimum petrol consumption that could be obtained on a Morris Minor. So the engine with the supercharger was taken out of the chassis, and in its place was installed an ordinary standard side valve engine, exactly the same as you find in any Morris Minor car that is sold to the public. The Royal Automobile Club were called in officially to observe the effort, and on main roads around Birmingham, the car was driven exactly 107 miles on a gallon of fuel. The same driver, Van der Beek, handled the car. Fuel that is commercially obtainable was used, and a standard carburetor setting was employed. Here is the RAC certificate that was issued officially to give proof of the performance. This is another remarkable achievement, and again assurance of the soundness of the design of the Morris Minor engine. Naturally, these racing models are not everybody's car, but we did what we set out to do, to prove that the design of the Morris Minor 100-pound car is, like other Morris models, right both as regards engine and chassis. Also, we proved that Morrisol, the new lubricant especially developed for Wolseley and Morris cars, and which was used both in the speed and the petrol consumption performances, is a good, superfine lubricant of the highest quality that can be relied upon to make an engine or a car give of its very best. In these days, when economy is exceptionally important to everyone, it is of particular interest to realize that Morris cars are extremely economical, especially insofar as their petrol consumption is concerned. In order effectively to prove this, we had the Royal Automobile Club conduct an officially observed trial of a saloon car of each of the types that we make. And the RAC certainly are extremely strict in the way in which these trials are conducted. They see that every feature of each car is exactly to standard specification, and that no special features are added that might affect the fuel consumption. After the cars had been run for 1,000 miles each, brand new SU carburetors were picked out of stock and were not specially tuned after fitting. The quantity of fuel was very, very carefully measured. The cars even had to start up from standstill on the measured quantity, which was poured into a separate test tank. The distances along the road traversed, too, were checked with meticulous accuracy, the speedometer not being relied upon. After the necessary supply had been measured into the special tanks, it was sealed so that there could be no possible error, and every other precaution, too, was taken to see that an accurate figure was obtained. The route used was normal, reasonably flat main roads, the kind of surfaces over which the average motorist usually travels. The cars were driven in a perfectly ordinary manner and were not even allowed to coast down hills. The RAC observer rode in the car to see that the clutch was not disengaged or any other unusual method to give particular petrol economy was employed. The average speed, of course, at which the cars were driven was lower than that at which people usually drive, being 20 miles an hour in the case of the Minor, but 25 miles an hour in the case of the other cars. The results obtained were certainly very gratifying indeed. After all the cars had been tested, the Royal Automobile Club officially issued a certificate, and the figures obtained were very gratifying. The Morris Minor registered 63.4 mpg, the Morris Cowley 37.5, the six-cylinder Morris Major 35.1, the Morris Oxford 33.1, and the Morris Isis 6 29.2. These surely are proof of real economy. Here is a clever cinematographic illusion to show you how a car is built up. This, of course, is not the actual way that we build cars at Cowley, but the various parts make their appearance in the actual order in which they are fitted. First of all, the front axle and wheels, then the back axle and transmission, then the engine, then the steering and the dash, and then the radiator. Next, we put on the front wings, the lamps, and all the auxiliaries, and after that, we mount the body. Last of all, and most important, a Morris owner drives the finished car away.